A biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
On a Monday, we like to check in with the Australian Christian Lobby and just get an update on this week's political agenda. Michelle Pearse is the CEO at the ACL. Michelle, a special welcome back to 2020.
Thanks for having me again, Neil.
Michelle, let's talk New South Wales and this growing pressure now on conscientious objectors because of the lack of abortion providers. What's your understanding of what's developing?
It's really interesting that through this whole, bringing up this bill, it's been revealed that there simply isn't enough doctors willing to provide abortions, especially in regional areas. So when you sit back and look at this, it's actually a good thing. Because it's not just Christian medical practitioners who don't want to perform abortions. Many doctors don't want to perform, especially late-term abortions, and that's what I mean by that being a good thing. We think that abortion is so prevalent everywhere, but in regional areas, a lot of these doctors, many who just have just good values, who come from perhaps conservative background, have this value of life and don't want to perform these abortions. So there's just not enough abortion providers to meet the demand. And so this is where this push is coming from the Greens to enforce and mandate doctors to at least refer directly to an abortion provider rather than to what's currently a helpline. So, the reason why doctors don't want to perform abortions is we know it's a grotesque procedure, and doctors go into healthcare to save lives and to help people, not to help to end the lives, and especially through this kind of procedure. So there's a lot that goes into training a doctor to kill a baby effectively in utero and then procure contractions to then deliver a dead baby. And, many have to, sever their conscience, really, to be able to do this kind of act. So the Greens see this as a big problem. And so the Greens want the New South Wales Health Minister to mandate all public hospitals to actually perform these abortions. And, these annoying conscientious objectors, as the Greens think they are in the way to that. And so they're trying to make it just a quicker procedure for the woman who goes to the doctor to then refer directly to somebody who can perform this abortion. So it's terrible, and it's a real threat to conscientious protections and a threat to women as well, who are forced more violently into this procedure more quickly. And but what I think is this is actually an opportunity because this has exposed a so-called problem of the abortion providers not being able to meet the demand of women who want abortion. So New South Wales Health should look at other alternatives then, supporting the woman. What are the barriers to this woman having this baby? Perhaps it's a financial barrier. Perhaps she feels ashamed. There's many reasons why women have abortions. And so instead of pushing more doctors to do abortions and mandating public hospitals to perform them, they should be opening up the options for women to support them in having a baby. We think abortion is never the answer, but for those who think it's a viable option, we need to help them to see that it's not the only viable option and that women should be provided the full range of options.
A full range of options indeed. Hey, when we're talking about this issue, isn't it interesting when doctors become the focal point of abortions and referrals and such things? But there are an awful lot of people who work in a medical surgery, we're taking patients who are coming in. There's nursing staff, there's receptionists, there's people who clean and do all sorts of other jobs around these things. When you've got a doctor's surgery that is under obligation to refer or perform abortions, doesn't that become something that it engulfs everybody who works for that organisation?
And you can see exactly how people would feel complicit with the act of abortion just simply by, like you said, providing some service to that hospital that provides those abortions. So the New South Wales Health needs to be very aware that this will cause a great conflict of conscience for many, many people, like you said, not just the health practitioners, but all of those who service the hospital. And, you know, they're also pushing for midwives to be able to prescribe the abortion pill as well, so bringing them into that complicity as well. So, you know, this isn't just a small fix to the problem of not enough abortion providers, but this is going to cause great conflict amongst the whole health profession.
A little bit of research I was doing just a short while ago. It appears the New South Wales government has gone to ground. They've gone quiet on how they expect to balance the rights of conscientious objectors with their expanding regime around abortion. The fact that they've gone quiet, does that mean that they really haven't got any answers here, or they're just going to push something through? Sounds to me a little bit like what went on in the ACT. Is this a fear of what might be coming?
Yeah, I mean they've told us that they are going to allow a conscience vote on the issue. So perhaps because they're saying, well, it's up to each member to decide, which I think is such a weak and cowardly move, because this isn't even about, to us it's a pro-life issue, but this is about conscientious objection. That's what this bill is about. And so to relegate it to an individual vote is really cowardly. The government needs to make a stand and say this is against freedom. This is an abuse of our obligations to our international human rights conventions. And so the New South Wales government, the Labor government, needs to vote as a whole against this. So to give them a conscience vote is really a cowardly way out of dealing with this from a leadership perspective.
I don't know whether you know the answer to this, Michelle, but how much influence do the Greens have in New South Wales? This sort of extremism pushing the ALP in New South Wales, to further extremes than maybe a lot of people who vote for the ALP are comfortable with. Do you know how much influence there might be of the Greens in New South Wales?
Well, this will be telling, and they're doing the same thing in Victoria, which we'll talk about in a moment. And it's really testing those parties that lean to the left, or in Victoria's case, very left. How far will they go? How far are they willing to go? I'm really concerned that this sort of pressure, that they're not going to be able to, according to their worldview, argue their way out of it. Because if abortion is, like they say, healthcare and every woman's right to access abortion, well, shouldn't they then just force the health practitioners to provide these abortions? So I hope that the opposite will happen, in terms of they'll realise that there is a line here, and they can't cross it. There is a line of freedom. There's a line in terms of who we are as a nation, our democracy and our values, that they should not cross. And so I think this is a real test for the New South Wales Labor government. Are they going to be clear on where this ends?
Well, special honour to the ACL. You'll be putting a position forward for everyone to say, hey, this is the Christian position, and then negotiating around that, hopefully. But for listeners today, opportunities to take action in New South Wales. There's a New South Wales pro-life rally coming up. What's that one all about? Yeah,
we encourage everybody in New South Wales to attend this. Leave work early, come along. It's at the New South Wales Parliament from 5 to 6 p.m. Our State Director Joshua Rowe will be there. Joanna Howe will be there, and a coalition of others. They're hoping for, thousands to turn up to make this stand against this Greens bill. The numbers matter. Numbers matter in a democracy. They matter in politics. So the number of people there really does matter. So I encourage all the listeners to get the word out to their church groups, ask their pastor if they can email the entire congregation. Let's get as many people there as possible to make a very clear stand against this bill.
And details hopefully there on the ACL website. Hey, let's turn some attention to Queensland, where the Queensland government's decision to put the Respect at Work bill on hold. What does all that mean?
Yeah, so this was introduced by Labor last year. It was actually set to take effect in the middle of this year. So now the Christopher government has put it on hold. Now, we wrote a very firm submission against this bill, because what it was essentially about is enforcing the woke ideology into all workplaces without any respect of somebody's faith or without any respect whether it was a faith-based institution. And what it's to do with is the widening of the definition of sexual harassment. So when we think of sexual harassment, we think of something different to what is in this bill. They've included things like causing offence to people based on their gender identity or their sexual orientation, so expanding what sexual harassment actually is. And what it did was enforce an obligation on all workplaces to provide training and resources and material that enforce this kind of non-offence culture where you can't even disagree and, that you must respect and even celebrate all types of gender and sexuality. So, like I said, we wouldn't actually be concerned if it was about sexual harassment as we understand it, because, of course, we're against sexual harassment. But this was about expanding the definition of sexual harassment in a way that actually waters down what it should be and puts pressure on people of faith to affirm something that they're fundamentally against. So we are glad that it's put on hold, and we just hope that the consultation now really does take seriously the concerns of people of faith.
Okay, bill on hold, and as we might know in Queensland, they can put things on hold and put time limits on that, and it might go, who knows how many years. But that's actually positive. No doubt they're going to be doing a review on that, and no doubt there's a lot of hard work to be done in lobbying politicians around what that bill really means. And I guess there's responsibility there for listeners to ask MPs in Queensland about how they're going to approach that. Hey, let's talk elder abuse inquiry in the state of Queensland too. How does this connect with issues around euthanasia?
Yeah, so ACL is now preparing a submission into this inquiry, and I remember I was actually the state director of ACL back in Western Australia back in the day, and they had an elder abuse inquiry there, which we were able to put together a submission that really showed the connection between elder abuse and pressure on the elderly to partake in voluntary assisted dying. So, and we would be naive to think that there isn't pressure placed on elderly people when euthanasia becomes more of a culture. And a prominent issue in elder abuse is children who pressure their elderly parents to access their inheritance early. And it's a really, sad state of affairs when you think of children who are supposed to care for their elderly parents, to see them as a burden and even worse, neglect them and, not visiting them and not checking up on them. And if the children of elderly parents are callous enough to, withhold care from them, then, perhaps they would be callous enough, and we do see evidence of this, to, pressure their elderly parents to speak to their health practitioner about voluntary assisted dying. And so, we know that elderly people probably already feel that internal pressure because they don't want to be a burden. But when that pressure comes from a family member or even a health practitioner, then the elderly person might feel like it's their only option. And so we need to advocate for the elderly in our society. They're vulnerable along with the other, people groups that we advocate for. The Bible calls us to advocate for those who are weaker than ourselves. And so the elderly, are in that category of being vulnerable. So, we need to do all that we can to advocate against pressure and against coercion and continue to make this case against killing. And so that's what we'll be doing in the elder abuse inquiry and encouraging others to do the same.
And of course, I guess we could say our Christian model is that we are going to care for our parents until their dying day, because we have this understanding, this ideal in our own belief that we are valuable because we're created in God's image, and it's not for us to, in any sort of artificial way, take away the life of another. So that's why we resist the thought of euthanasia, the VAD. But VAD, because it's legal in so many states and territories around Australia, it's like a permission model, isn't it? And when you talk about inheritance impatience, the idea that there'll be some families not quite as nice as yours. You want to care for your elderly parents, but there's a lot of families where their adult children can't wait to get their hands on the inheritance. That, you can sort of see in human nature that that's the way it's going to go. This permission model. What are your thoughts about the fact that VAD and euthanasia, it is a permission model for people to do the wrong thing?
Yeah, you're exactly right. The very fact that it exists puts the thought in the mind of the elderly person. Many elderly people are even afraid to go to the aged care service, or they're afraid to go to hospital when they're ill because they're afraid that euthanasia is going to be forced on them. And whether we like it or not, it becomes part of the health culture, and it becomes part of the culture of our society that we do away with those that don't contribute to society. And we've seen this happen in other nations, and we've seen the definitions of euthanasia be expanded to such as then allow people who are mentally ill to access euthanasia, to allow young people to access it. So like abortion, there's no end to this, and it's incredibly dangerous for society and really goes against all that Christians advocate for, which is caring for the vulnerable right up until the day of their natural death.
You mentioned the Greens in Victoria a little earlier when we started talking about some of these influence issues here. They've got an assisted suicide bill in Victoria. What's the latest development around the Greens in Victoria?
Yeah, well, the Allen Labor government have just responded to a 5-year review on their euthanasia laws. They've found that their laws don't actually go as far as the other states, and so they want to expand the eligibility for euthanasia and reduce the number of medical assessments that people need, and allow doctors to take the step to discuss VAD with their patients, voluntary assisted dying, without the patient even bringing it up. So this is terrible in itself. But the Greens want to go further. They don't think this goes far enough. So they want to remove the time-based prognosis for death altogether. So not 6 months, not 12 months, but no time-based prognosis. So, you think about what that means. We're all dying. So if you got told, that you're going to die at some stage, perhaps you have a very minor kind of cancer that could be done away, could be healed, that this opens up to all that, have the doctors said that they will die at some point from this disease. It will also obligate, this is the thing about conscientious objection that I was talking about before, it will obligate registered health practitioners, but as well as social workers and counsellors, to provide information to their patients about voluntary assisted dying, despite if they conscientiously object. So this is an overrun of their conscientious objection. But then also within this bill is to review whether 18-year-olds have the capacity, under 18-year-olds, have the capacity to make decisions on voluntary assisted dying. So usually the Labor government in Victoria doesn't support private members' bills, but like we were talking about before, the Greens will no doubt be putting pressure on them. And what could happen is they could adopt the Greens' proposals within their own bill. And so that's what we really need to pray against, that this doesn't become even more radical. And if the Greens bill is implemented, or even if it's within a Labor bill, it will be the most radical euthanasia laws around the nation, and it will create that new bar. We say when late-term abortion happened in Victoria, soon enough all the states have abortion to birth. When this happens in Victoria, it will be very a quick response all over the nation of expanding their euthanasia laws.
Wow. It's only a small step from voluntary to coercion. And if we were talking slippery slopes, a little closer there to even someone else making a decision as to whether you are a valuable enough part of the community to be left to remain alive. There are some challenging times ahead, and for listeners, when these sorts of things make sense when you hear them, to go from understanding and having an opinion about these things to actually taking action, that's where the challenge is. I'll point listeners to the ACL website, acl.org.au, the Australian Christian Lobby. No doubt, Michelle, in the preparation, because a federal election is coming, some of these issues are going to be front and centre. Or I know you'll be battling to make some of these issues front and centre because they work federally as well as with the states. For listeners to check in with you and to be a part of any sort of campaigning that you're doing, is there something special? When I point people to the ACL website, acl.org.au, is there something special that people will be able to link into to support the lobbying activity you'll have with the election?
Yeah, it's certainly, we have our australiavotes.org.au website that's going to be launched hopefully later this week. And it's really important that this resource goes, like wildfire through the churches across the nation, because this will give you all the information you need to make a well-informed decision to vote wisely at this election. And what we really want to do through not only that platform but through our socials and through the word spreading throughout the church is to expose the harm of the Greens. The Labor-Greens power-sharing arrangement will be bad for religious freedom, be bad for the sanctity of life and all the things we care about. And so, Christians do still vote Green because they think it's social justice and for the environment. So that will be our strong message through the election. Because of the Greens policy, it really is, a bad decision for those of faith to vote Green.
Well, Michelle Pearse is the CEO of the Australian Christian Lobby, acl.org.au. Michelle, thanks so much for another informative update today on 2020.
Thanks very much.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.